Hello and welcome to Colonial Outcast, the anti-imperialist podcast that has released 3 episodes this week because there is too much insanity going on, because that's how they get you. It's harder to hide behind 20 atrocities than it is behind one. And we're going to be talking about the masters of that today. So this week, more than 20 militaries have flown to Tel Aviv to learn operational lessons from the same army blindly guilty of genocide, which is currently ongoing during the quote-unquote peace plan, mass civilian executions, systemic starvation, SA violence against detainees, and essentially concentration camps. And these governments still showed up ostensibly to take notes. So this is an international seminar to present the lessons learned from Gaza, and the attendees are not surprising. Japan, Hungary, the United States, Morocco, Germany, and so on. And I see a lot of commentary about how they want to learn from what Israel has done. And while I've said many times warfare is like law, insofar as set precedents determine the framework for what is acceptable going forward forever, and now the state policy of bombing hospitals has been normalized for warfare forever, or at least the foreseeable future. But no one is trying to learn from what Israel did, at least from the military sense. There's always been this Palestine laboratory where, they test spyware and military tech on Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, and then we buy that. But how the operation actually went down, and I'll talk about this later, no one's trying to do that. So they didn't or learn from that. They didn't achieve any of their stated objectives, and they couldn't defeat or disarm resistance groups inside of Gaza. The UN-sanctioned international stabilization forces meant to give cover to Israel, disarm Hamas for them so that they can refocus on Lebanon, codify, and enshrine occupation, and through a sort of coalition building and joint responsibility, whitewash Israel's crimes. Through consensus comes legitimacy. And I'm going to talk more about this later. And why no serious military official attending this conference is there to actually learn anything. It's all theater because Zionism is in crisis, and the status and our relationship to, at least popularly in Europe and the United States, is radically shifting, or it has over the past 2 years. So Zionism's crisis, so is capitalism. Woo. So today I want to discuss this crisis, the rehabilitation of occupation under the cover of like coalition stabilization forces, and whether or not we are losing steam in the Palestine movement. One of my Palestinian American friends just texted me this morning, quote, "I am losing my mind. Have we just accepted the rebranding of the ethnic cleansing and expansion as ceasefire? What the F is up with the UN? This is like the first Nakba all over again. America and Israel both occupying Gaza. No one is even talking about it. Did they wear us out?" So a lot to go over today, and we are joined by 2 awesome guests. Sim Kern is an American Jewish environmental journalist, activist, writer, and author of the book that Sarah Hurwitz should be forced to read before being shipped off to prison for manufacturing consent for mass murder, titled Genocide Bad, Notes on Palestine, Jewish History, and Collective Liberation. And Yuval Mans, he's been on here before, like when we first started. He's coming to us from the land of the Zapatistas. He's an essayist, activist, and like me, a military veteran. He was a former IDF soldier. He grew up Orthodox, and he is very far from that right now. So thank you both for coming on.
Thanks for
Pleasure to be
having
here.
us.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on last minute. Like a lot has happened this week. Apparently we're going to war with Venezuela. Cool. That's happening, I guess. We're focusing heavily on a non-existent genocide in Nigeria. A lot of violence is happening, but it does not meet the criteria, unlike what's happening in Gaza or Sudan or other places in the Congo. And we are basically seeing not just a massive launch of like refocus of Israeli, spyware and AI algorithms to kind of like geofence and target like Christian Zionists in America to kind of get evangelicals back on board, because now some of the right's kind of fracturing. And then we've got this, a multinational military conference to kind of legitimize or pretend to legitimize Israel's military action in Gaza. But I think the craziest thing that I've seen all of this is completely anticipated. But what I didn't anticipate, and I should have, was former Obama speechwriter speaking at a Jewish conference. I think what was it, Miami or New York? I should have figured that out. One of the two places, saying some things that I guys would like your thoughts on. So I'm just going to play it. I'm sure everybody who watches or listens to this podcast has heard it, but you're going to have to hear it one more time. We can really unpack everything that's happening here. And, you know, I grew up in like around a lot of white supremacists. So I kind of get it, like the massive cognitive dissonance and like getting so close to actually understand what's going on and just missing it completely. So let's roll it.
Since October 7th, but really before then, there have been huge shifts in America on how people think about Jews and Israel. And I think that is especially true of young people. So we are now wrestling with a new, I think, generational divide here. And I think that's particularly true in that social media is now our source of media. And this, you know, it used to be that the media you got in America was American media, and it was pretty mainstream. You know, it generally didn't express extreme anti-Israel views. You had to go to a pretty weird bookstore to find global media and fringe media. But today,
you'd have to go to an actual leftist bookstore, not something that you find in Obama's library.
Today, we have social media, which is a global medium, right? It is shaped, its algorithms are shaped by billions of people worldwide who don't really love Jews. And so while in the 1990s, you know, a young person probably wasn't going to find Al Jazeera or someone like Nick Fuentes, today,
I'm going to stop interrupting this, but like putting Nick Fuentes and Al Jazeera like on the same freaking medium is kind of crazy.
Those media outlets find them. They find them on their phones. It's also this increasingly post-literate media, less and less text, more and more videos. So you have TikTok just smashing our young people's brains all day long with video of carnage in Gaza. And this is why so many of us can't have a sane conversation with younger Jews, because anything that we try to say to them, they are hearing it through this wall of carnage. So I want to give data and information and facts and arguments, and they are just seeing in their minds carnage, and I sound obscene. And, you know, I think...
Yeah, nailed it.
Fortunately, the very smart, I think, bet that we made on Holocaust education to serve as anti-Semitism education, in this new media environment, I think that is beginning to break down a little bit, because, you know, Holocaust education is absolutely essential. But I think it may be confusing some of our young people about anti-Semitism because they learn about big, strong Nazis hurting weak, emaciated Jews. And they think, oh, anti-Semitism is like anti-Black racism, right? Powerful white people against powerless Black people. So when on TikTok all day long they see powerful Israelis hurting weak, skinny Palestinians, it's not surprising that they think, oh, I know, the lesson of the Holocaust is you fight Israel. You fight the big, powerful people hurting the weak people.
No shit.
We can't have that.
Yeah.
I've a lot has been said, and we will say about the like last point that she made. But the first thing that's really wild is when she says up front, like, it used to be that you fucking idiots only listen to the propaganda that we fed you, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is so condescending. You know, she was an Obama speechwriter, and she, back in the good old days when Obama was president, you had to go to a lefty bookstore to hear anything other than the drivel that I force fed you. And the fact that like global media is the enemy here, because God forbid people in the US have found out about perspectives from other parts of the world. And this is so threatening to Zionism and the US imperial project. It's just, to me, that's almost the wildest part of what she said out loud. And it's like so how can you not, as a US citizen, be so insulted by that?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like patronizing. I guess, like, yeah, well, but you know, this is not the first time these like Zionist talking heads have brought up this generational divide. You know, we saw Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL saying it's not like a culture war issue; it's a generation issue. So, I don't know. I'm kind of glad to have both y'all's perspectives on this. I know that Yuval grew up Orthodox in Israel. Were you on the kibbutz? I forget. No. Okay. But you definitely grew up in those like circles. You know, I was just in Israel recently and definitely I kind of wonder, like, if you're actually there, like how entrenched or like how possible is like rehabilitation like out of this? Because just watching that speech and just seeing her get so close to it and then just completely miss the point of everything. I don't know.
Yeah,
It just kind of
yeah.
seems like, well, after the Reich fell, people didn't stop being Nazis. So I guess we're kind of your sense about like where they're at, where this is going, and what they'll do to kind of just try to save this ideology.
I think something that is important to mention out that kind of accomplishes multiple things simultaneously, including completely destroying whatever the fuck she's coming up with in her delusional mind, and which is also what we're always trying to do, maybe point towards new possibilities. And that is that this this speech, if we can even call it that, is a testament to how our subjectivity is generated by our material reality, not vice versa. Like she points out how people seeing the carnage and that changes them inadvertently, pointing into the material reality which we are all witnessing, which changed a lot of our minds and subjectivity and how we think and how we act and how we speak. But it's also pointing out to the fallacy of Zionism itself and how it's in crisis and collapse, but also how it's formed, both historically as Ashkenazi Jews, fleeing persecution, which kind of allowed or created the kind of fertile ground for people being entrenched into Zionist militarism and completely made up Jewish national identity. But also, as you asked, Greg, Israel is today, and it's a conversation that I'm having right now outside of the spaces that we all are hanging out in, because it's happening in Hebrew. I'm writing in Hebrew a lot. A lot of people don't know it, but a lot of Israelis are hanging out on Facebook, even young people, for some reason. So I'm writing in Hebrew there, and there is a discourse that is happening there that I think is very fascinating, and I want to bring it into the kind of global English-speaking world or whatever, between different factions. So there is like a growing movement that is gaining strength and becoming normalized, which is the kind of anti-Zionist, like staunchly anti-Zionist, decolonial people who grew up on the land, both Palestinian and Israelis and so on, which used to be seen as this like fringe, crazy group, and still are to a degree, but we become a lot, what we say of like deconstructing and destroying the Zionist entity becomes a lot more normalized. And on the other hand, the kind of pushback to that, which you would expect from like right-wing Israeli society at large, but you wouldn't expect as much from, I don't know, leftists, right? People who claim they want Palestinian liberation, but put sticks in our wheels at every fucking turn. And I spoke about it. I had this conversation with, I'm not going to name names, but one Zionist Palestinian who is working in like a big corporation in Israel, and one like a club, nightclub owner, Israeli, very successful club, both of which were fighting with me discursively about this very thing, going in circles forever and ever and ever, avoiding the actual arguments that I'm putting out on why is it important to deconstruct the state itself and why, as long as it exists, there is Palestinian oppression. And instead of answering any of my points, they were just going in circles, getting obsessed about terms. Is it colonialism? Is it not colonialism? Da, 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 da.
Straight out of the CIA handbook.
Yeah, exactly. In order to justify the existence of two states, the so-called fucking two-state solution, whatever that means. And I pointed out to them how their privilege and their material realities are invested in the existence of the state, which creates their worldviews, not vice versa. And I think that is something that she is pointing towards without intention, of course. And it's something that can help us unravel how people think, how our subjectivities are created, and maybe how can we potentially create new subjectivities by changing material realities of dependency and investment in these systems of oppression. And I think that's something worth kind of thinking about when we try to understand, because it's not about brainwash. It's not about discourse. It's not about ideas and ideologies only. There is very material reality that is still currently invested in the existence of these systems of oppression. So this is what comes up for me when I'm listening to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like to respond?
Yeah, I mean, she talks about her whole livelihood as an Obama speechwriter has been like to defend empire, right?
Exactly.
So you see this incredibly convoluted logic. To be clear, she's suggesting in that video, I think, that we need to stop teaching the Holocaust so much in order to teach anti-Semitism, because by teaching the Holocaust, we've taught people to spot a genocide and respond accordingly. And to be anti-genocide. And she's now basically saying that being anti-genocide and being not anti-Semitic are now incompatible. That if you are anti-genocidal, then you are anti-Semitic. Of course, this is nothing new. This is what Israel has been trying to shove down our throats for a long time. And she talks about the context that young people are missing. And I thought, and I saw a lot of comments under the video. What context is she talking about? What context makes big, strong soldiers pointing big guns at emaciated
children,
starving people and children who've been bombed? What context makes that okay? And it's just racism. Like, it's just a deep, visceral, virulent dehumanization of a group of people, where like the thing that young people aren't understanding is that she views like all these Palestinian people as, baby terrorists, as evil. And the Jews, why don't we understand? The Jews are the good guys because of their blood and their ethnicity, and because that's how they were born. And the Palestinians are the bad guys because of their blood and ethnicity, and that's how they were born. And if you don't have that racist understanding, it sounds like it's just impossible to understand. And she can't understand these young people who don't have that deep racist conditioning.
Yeah, it's also like completely like linked to these system of oppressions, because like the craziest part of this is that like 1 minute and 40 seconds into the clip, when she backhandedly argues against the Holocaust education because it can lead people to not to sympathize with American Black people and Palestinians too.
Yeah.
Oh no!
Also the Black people.
Yeah.
Sounds horrible.
And wait till she finds out that by learning about the Warsaw Ghetto fighters, some people like me have learned to also empathize with other anti-colonial resistance fighters, right? Like, there's incredible parallels there. So yeah, teaching the Holocaust is dangerous if you're a fascist. Like, if you make your livelihood bolstering imperial power, then it is a bad idea to teach the Holocaust as a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that was a good point you made. Like, she has spent her entire career like defending empire, not just that, like also because Obama, he was the one who basically started the whole privatization of like ICE prisons as well. Like, this is why when I talk about like the war state and the police state, they're like literally the same state. And we're going to talk about like Nick Fuentes and people on the right better who are like, we need to come back and have a populist movement that like kicks Jews out of our government, but like the left is going to need to give up on immigration, and the right's going to need to give up on free markets. I was like, okay, guys, we're not doing national socialism again, because that's really like what it is. It is coded for that. But like, yeah, I mean, she definitely supports those structures, absolutely. And yeah, I guess it's not surprising, but it's a really good demonstration of what I always say. I spent a lot of time in Texas. A lot of family members. Oh my God, it's about to be Thanksgiving. They are now on the, it's the Israel controls our government thing. I was like, no, can you stop? It's a little bit more thorny than like other colonial relationships, like the British Raj and England, because like there is a lot of like undue influence that the Israel lobby has, on us. And it's not just the Israel lobby, it's also the real estate lobby, which is the biggest lobby there. It's also heavily invested in Israeli development and the development of Gaza. But it's a whole system. Okay. And what Israel is, it's an extension, or at least in this context, it is an extension from the imperial perspective of U.S. empire to destabilize the region, to carve it into vassal states whose leaders will allow us to exploit them or exploit their people and resources for Western capitalists. I mean, that's it. And, because just listen to our politicians who actually make these policies. Biden himself said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd need to make one. Marco Rubio called it our aircraft carrier in the Middle East. And then Ted Cruz just at a evangelical Zionist lobby like this week said this. It's completely imperial.
Those who hate Israel.
Oh, sorry. What's up?
Oh, I was just going to respond and say, as a Texan Jew, I give you permission to find common ground with your relatives on the like Israel controls the government thing and be like, yes, in many ways, but also let me complicate that for you.
Yeah.
That's, I'm all about finding common ground with our more conservative relatives and building from there.
I mean, yeah, because the bottom line is there just aren't enough of us. So we need to bring more people and hopefully shepherd them into better politics, which has happened.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Yuval.
No, that's what transcends the kind of neoliberal political spectrum of left and right and takes it towards revolutionary proliferation, which is we have an aim that is the aim, and whoever help us create that aim, we can collaborate on that. It comes to mind the story of the Black Panthers who collaborated with this very openly racist group,
the Young Patriots.
Yes, without asking them to take down the Confederate flag. And eventually they did, out of respect for the Black Panthers, and because they learned through actual activity and material interaction with them about racism, which doesn't happen in discourses of words online, right? Like this is the exact thing that she's embodying in that speech. Is like it's just words. We're teaching this, we're teaching that, and fighting over like the terminology of certain things. But in reality, there is the carnage that people are seeing. How are you accounting for that? And in the same way, like we have to focus on collaborating. And I would collaborate with Nick Fuentes as long as we can reach the right thing. If he's bringing up something that I'm not in disagreement with and makes it impossible or make the capacity for collaborating void, then we're not going to do that, right? Why I'm fighting with liberal Zionists is because we can't collaborate with them because they are consistently making it impossible to destroy the state of Israel and help directly with their words, with their discourse, with their action, with their constantly bringing up this amorphic desire for criticizing Hamas as well in some kind of equation with like, you know what I mean?
Like sides are bad. Let's not talk about the
exactly.
overall power dynamic.
Exactly. But I can collaborate with people who say, hey, I want the end of the state of Israel. And I understand that this is a colonial project that have to end for Palestinian oppression to end. However, I have a disagreement about this thing or that thing or whatever. I have some racist views. Fine, we can collaborate. That's enough for me. Let's do that. Reminds me of a friend who told me that he's going consistently to soup kitchens in the US. And it's always like there is no liberals there, only a bunch of Republicans and him feeding people. You know?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But we'll skip the Ted Cruz thing. It was kind of funny. He basically just says like we give them $10 billion of aid and we get all this intelligence from the Mossad on Iran. If we had to collect that ourselves, it would cost way more than $3 billion. He's not wrong. And that's kind of like one of the examples that like complicates it for, we were the ones who overthrew, before Israel was even an issue or Iran was even like threatening Israel in the 50s, Mohammad Mossadegh, because we wanted, just like Venezuela, their rare, it was before rare earths were really a thing, but like oil and also their strategic positioning and stuff like that. So it's our engagement with Iran is not as ideological as it is for a lot of people. I mean, he's a Christian Zionist, so obviously it's very ideological for him, but it's always been part of the imperial playbook. Even when I was in the military in 2009, I was reading position papers about what an Iranian invasion would look like. And that was official, like
fucking crazy
Pentagon stuff. Yeah. Dick Cheney's rumored to have said like, we should have invaded Iran, during the opening days when we still had the chance. It's always been on the chopping block, and it's not completely ideological. This is part of our area or our need for full spectrum regional dominance in every part of the world. So Venezuela's got to go, Iran's got to go, Taiwan needs to be fortified. It's just our playbook. And the Jews control everything doesn't explain what's happening in Venezuela, doesn't explain what's happening in the Ukraine. It doesn't explain, Okinawa and Taiwan and everything we're doing. Like It just only fits into one region of the world that we use this country to do our dirty work for.
Well, and this feeds into a discussion of capitalism, which any
Yes.
discussion of genocide should be talking about money.
Mhm.
Because this is big business. Weapons manufacturers have had the best 2 years in history of profits. And what does capitalism demand? Endless growth. So they need to keep, like, genocide has proven to be extremely lucrative for some very, very powerful people. And
The
they
real
need to
estate
keep
investment
expanding.
of the lifetime. That's what Gaza Lago is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and that it's good. It's if we don't draw a line in the sand to stop it, also this will just continue to expand. That's how these economic forces work.
And let's not talk about the oil at the shores of Gaza as well, which of course,
Yeah, which we actually need, because we're trying to run these massive AI data centers with 19th century technology because we don't have any clean renewable sources to run them, and they take the freaking power of a new city. And like one of the reasons that like our AI tech bubble is probably going to burst is because we don't have enough raw materials and resources to actually run the data centers that OpenAI has like $1.5 trillion in spending commitments by 2030. It's just insane. So we need as much oil as possible.
And because it's garbage. These models are garbage and they are unable to produce anything that you can actually sell that creates any kind of value. That's the main thing. Like they get trillions of dollars in investment and are unable to produce anything that can generate income.
Well, again, back to Sim's point, that this is just like pump and dump capitalism. Like we're just going to keep this train going as long as possible. And like, it reminds me of that cartoon where the road runner was like running off the cliff and he would just keep running until, and as long as you don't look down, you're not gonna fall. No, but I think that's really demonstrative of this. And I can, channel like, the revolutionary standpoint of the Black Panthers. But like for me, as someone who grew up around these like fascist white supremacists, also a Texan, like it does get difficult when Nick Fuentes is on this kind of stuff. Hang on. Sorry. Stand by. I didn't expect to play this, but it's exactly the problem. And this is why I think America First could be like controlled opposition. Because anything to not talk about
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
All right, I'm going to play this video and we're going to talk about controlled opposition in America First.
Hear any more about your ancestors in the Holocaust? We don't.
This was from this week.
Want to hear about it. We don't care. We're in the middle of a Holocaust. Do you know what's happening in Europe and the United States? The white population is being genocided. Where there used to be pillars and cathedrals, where there used to be order, where there used to be science and reason, now there is chaos and death and crime and superstition. And that is because all of these countries.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
To be clear, I wasn't mentioning Fuentes particularly.
Not a good one.
I'm giving him as like
he's important to talk about because the people you are going to be engaging with in this like liberatory struggle are going to be people who are like, Nick Fuentes is on the truth right now.
But I think there is a vast difference between someone like Nick Fuentes, whom his material investments and privileges and access to power is directly invested in these structures, and between your neighbor, who actually their needs are invested in the aims that you are trying to promote, and they just have a sense that Nick Fuentes is representing them, right? And I think that's a big difference, right? Like you could feed people hungry in your community and build systems of sustenance and regenerative care and mutual aid with people who think Nick Fuentes is some genius, as long as these things are happening, like collecting, like water collection, food security, systems of education and healthcare that are outside of the logics of state and capital. That you can do with that neighbor. You know what I mean? That's my point.
I don't think a ton of Nick Fuentes diehards are like at the soup kitchen, like at the Food Not Bombs.
Yeah. I mean, I don't imagine either. I mean, but a lot of people in I think in America specifically talk about Republicans as this these people who elected
Like
Trump.
a monolith. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's a monolith. Like it's people who have, and in reality, what's happening is there is a conception that was created for them where they think that their material conditions are invested in that system, where in fact it's just serving the billionaires. So instead of trying to explain that to them, which only creates more antagonism, we need to, I think, to start collaborating on actual material stuff that helps both of us get our needs met. And then from there, out of that engagement, new subjectivities are being created. When people come together to cook together, to feed together, to build together, to plant together, their subjectivities are being generated differently in that process.
I don't think they're like mutually exclusive. I mean, so I have conservative family members, Zionist family members that, I've had these difficult conversations with. And like I said, I mean, I think getting your family is really good. I'm a little against, if your family member is abusive to you or whatever, like go ahead and cut them off. But this like predominant culture of like young, more leftist, more liberal people in the US, just like cutting off all communication with older relatives that are more conservative simply because they're conservative, simply because they find their politics distasteful. I think in some cases, that's a cop-out. It is emotionally exhausting to try to communicate across the propaganda divide. But I keep saying to people, it is often not an ethical divide, it's a propaganda divide. And what our older and more conservative neighbors and relatives are seeing in their media landscape is completely different from what we're seeing in our media landscape. And for some people, what Nick Fuentes is saying makes a lot of sense to them. And the thing that's commonality where you can meet them and try to talk and build is that they're feeling like they're suffering and their way of life has become impossible and untenable. And you have to help them see that that's because of capitalism and not because of immigrants.
Yeah. It's not just that, like, because people I want to talk to y'all about this because like it's not just that, right? It's not just white people are being replaced. It's also this idea that he puts forward, and a lot of people on the right now are putting forward this idea of cultural Marxism. Have you guys heard this term? I grew up around a bunch of the Nazis, so it was originally called cultural Bolshevikism, where they believed that the Russian Civil War and the Bolshevik Revolution, which apparently killed 100 million Christians, was a Jewish conspiracy. Oh. And they're now linking
that one.
Yeah, both communism and fractal banking in the Federal Reserve. So they're responsible for both communism and unchecked, heedless finance capitalism at the same time. And that's kind of like one of my friends, I think a lot of people on the who listen would know her. She's Josephine Gilbo. She's a former U.S. intelligence officer. She tries to get me to keep talking to these like veterans on the right because we're trying to mobilize more veterans as a coalition, just like during the Vietnam backlash, just because we have some like social and cultural capital because of the grotesque militarization of our society, to talk to these guys. And I was like, no, I can't talk to this dude because he is a cultural Marxist. And at the core of culture, like believing in cultural Marxism, is that the communists are trying, and the anarchists, and anyone who's like ever read Marx, actually read it, is like trying to destroy Christianity and traditional values and whiteness. So
I mean, we kind of do.
Yeah, that would be sick, actually.
It's just not bad,
Yeah, you can't use those terms. That's why you can't use buzzwords. I recommend people, when you're trying to have these conversations, keep everything really, really personal.
Yep.
Like talk about like personal stories. Like what finally got through to my mom was like me telling her about like people I've been fundraising for in Gaza, and like I have their baby pictures in my phone, and like I am deeply invested in these individual people as human beings and how it's affected my life. Another huge thing was like her finding out that like I've gotten so many death threats and stuff. Like she doesn't know how to care about Palestinians writ large because of cultural conditioning, but she knows how to care about me. And so when I show her how when I articulate how these things happening to people on the other side of the world are directly impacting me and like fucking with me, just that, I encourage people, try to explain that,
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
If you can
Correct.
tell, she used the word illegals around me once. And I just told her like a really heartbreaking story about one of my friends who's was in the process of getting naturalized when Trump became president. And it's just like, it's a really fucked up story. And she was like, afterwards, she was like, I'm sorry, I won't use that word again, you know? So, and that's like a breakthrough for talking with her. Because literally the bubble she lives in and the media bubble she lives in, immigrants weren't like people to her until I told her about my friend. You know what I mean? So that I think that's what, but when you start to use buzzwords, especially if you use words like Marxism and anarchism and name dropping, you know, leftist thinkers and any sort of word that's been like turned into a third rail by our politics, then they just shut off and get defensive, and it's harder to break through.
I'm going to play devil advocate for my previous argument and say that what you said right now is incredibly true, and I think very reasonable within most of America kind of landscape. In Israel, that becomes even harder. I found that on every post that I see showing real suffering of real human beings in Gaza, there are thousands of people commenting happiness, joy, smiley, laughing. Like there is an incredible derailment of human empathy within Israeli society everywhere on the spectrum. I doubt that if I show my mom a Palestinian family that I'm fundraising to, it would move anything, you know. It might maybe, and maybe over time, and I will keep doing it because, you know, I totally stand behind what you said about not cutting off and like keep planting the seeds. But it is far harder landscape to traverse. It's crazy, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like when I see all those like white replacement theory fascist accounts like making memes about like, or even the White House posting like songs, like fun quirky music videos to people being taken out and sent to CCOT in El Salvador in chains, and everyone's like, I voted for this. It's like that, but like 10 times worse. I mean,
Yeah.
I was just recently there and just interacting with Israeli prison guards, and those are not people you're going to save. And I said that I was like 2 meters away from Ben Gvir. Again, not a smart man, but you know there will be his cultists and Smotrish's cultists like surrounding them until the day they die, and on afterwards. So I guess my question, like circling back to like this Sarah Hurwitz video. They're definitely concerned about a generational issue or it's a generational concern. Like they're losing the Zoomers, and that's one way that it can come crashing down. But I don't know. Like, what's your sense? Do you think like American Jews, because that's a solid power base, because they're losing a lot of evangelicals like Zionists, which is also a solid power base for unconditional support of Israeli military and economic action throughout the world. But like, is this something that they're actually losing? Are they losing the information war on this with their own like diaspora?
Yes, 100%. They've
Okay.
taken a massive hit, and the last few weeks have been demoralizing because, especially as like a creator online, I think a lot of us have seen very immediately. You know, there were some announcement that like Israel made some deal with Meta to get a handle on the algorithms, and like there's like views have taken a hit. The algorithms have cracked down. And big accounts have been removed. Mint Press, I saw, just lost its account on.
Yeah, so I work for Mint Press part time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to start posting their stuff on mine before I get freaking banned.
Yeah, you know, and then there's all this influx of money into ChatGPT, which it remains to be seen if it will be successful because AI doesn't always do what people want it to do. They're spending the fact that they're spending just vast millions and millions and millions of dollars in social media buying TikTok it's disheartening because you can see the effects immediately, and definitely the views of videos coming out of Gaza have gone down. Tragically, over 200 journalists in Gaza have been killed. So there's just simply less content coming out. There's been, since the ceasefire, a massive effort to just quit talking about that and move on. But I think that's all evidence of just how much ground we've gained, and it seems pathetic to me. And I think the last few weeks have been a bad couple of weeks, but everyone who's learned things over the past 2 years isn't going to unlearn those things overnight because ChatGPT tells them otherwise. And they're trying to shove this down our throat. At the same time, they're trying and failing to shove AI down our throats. And increasingly, you just see AI treated as a total joke across certainly the social media landscape. Like, people are not falling for it. I don't think they're going to fall for it with Zionism either. I have faith that these ridiculous systems and technologies, just no amount of money is gonna shove it down our throats.
Yeah. Just circling back to what you said about young people seeing the carnage, I think that over the last couple of years, we have armed a whole generation of people with the new cognitive abilities and metacognition skills and critical thinking skills to using Palestine as the kind of portal or gateway to it, but now in a way that kind of unravels a lot of other things. And I think that's not going anywhere, no matter how much money they put into the algorithms. It's not, again, because how people think is not entirely a function of what they see and what they are exposed to. That's playing a part to it, but it's also how their investments are made, their passions and desires are made. And there is like an unbelievable amount of new revolutionary desire that has proliferated around the problem of Palestine in the last couple of years that is not going to just dissipate. It can't go to nowhere. It's either going to, and there is danger, yeah, it can become co-opted into kind of liberal, two-state solution vibe kind of thing that pretends to be revolutionary but is not. But I don't think so. I can't see how this level of revolutionary passion is just going to disappear.
Well, we can all, I think we can all agree that the material conditions in the United States and Europe are not about to like get better. So
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's normal for revolutionary energy to wax and wane. It is a cycle, and every revolutionary sort of explosion of energy is setting the framework for the next one. And like, I came of age during the Occupy movement and the Arab Spring of 2011, and you can draw a direct line. I mean, you can see how Occupy in the US, the Arab Spring inspired Occupy, and then Occupy very much set the stage for things that would happen 3 years later in Ferguson during the original Black Lives Matter movement, which then set the stage for the 2020 Black Lives Matter movement. And that very much set the stage. All that, talk of understanding racism and structural racism very much set the stage in the West for there to be this current student encampment and all the activism around Palestine. All of these things are connected in a revolutionary tradition. And so all the work that's been done over the past 2 years around Gaza and Palestine, we minted a new generation of activists and of radicals among the youth and those of us who've been doing it for a while, learn new things and gain new skills and avenues of work. And that's right now there's you see this backlash, this incredible state backlash, this incredible oppression, but there will be another eruption later on. And I think it'll be the biggest one that we've seen in my lifetime.
Hopefully it will be more intersectional than just anti-ICE and pro-Palestine and stop.
I think we're moving towards, optimist that I am, I think we're moving towards a more global understanding. I mean, we weren't just talking, during the BLM movement in 2020, it was mostly focused nationally in the US on domestic policing issues. We weren't talking about Palestine and Sudan and Congo all in the same breath like we are now, I think the Occupy movement also really struggled. It was like trying to be, there were forces trying to make it just about domestic sort of, wanting more sort of socialist reforms. But the conversations that were had at the time, it became really obvious that like racial justice needed to be a part of any sort of anti-capitalist movement. So I see the scope of these revolutionary outbursts expanding, I think, to globally, which I think is what it has to be. To defeat a global empire, you have to have global resistance.
And I think a big factor that is going to play into it is also how climate realities are going to keep exacerbating, which is like a given reality. And I think like, again, going back to the material conditions, like when people's material conditions are suffering, they get to feel more solidarity with suffering. That's just the way it works. And the less it's comfortable and the less people can shelter behind the bubbly comfort, temporary comfort, or that this insane, delirious machine of capitalism allows, the more there is new revolutionary potential that is being released all the time into the sphere, because people want to do something about their conditions. And I think that's only going to exacerbate.
Yeah. That kind of like brings me to like the next point. Like, I think a lot of things or a lot of the powers that be of the ruling class are going to try to like co-opt these movements with what we talked about at the beginning, controlled opposition. I think a lot of people are disappointed because like Mamdani is like, I am going to keep Jessica Tisch as police commissioner of New York City, even though she's a rabid Zionist and a billionaire, and she just like one of the worst people. And then, he said, like, kind of casually, like, I will have Zionists, liberal Zionists in my staff, and I also don't want, I don't think now is the right time for a progressive, another democratic socialist, which is why I don't really believe that democratic socialism works, should not run yet. Now's not the time to primary Hakeem Jeffries, we definitely did see this coming. And generally, as people who exist more on the left, we talk about control opposition within like, the center, which is what I would call DSA. The Bernie Sanders, the AOC, stuff like that, where they make all these campaign promises and then they start interacting with, the billionaires and stuff, and then they fold on generally all of their progressive positions. But I've been kind of getting those vibes from the America First, because MAGA's dead. MAGA died because of the Epstein files and a whole bunch of other stuff. But now, everyone's like, ooh, it's America First now. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like tax money to spending our tax money on Americans. Oh my God, that's kind of close to socialism. But no, it's completely different, because like they're taking all this like populist energy and just blaming it on immigrants and Jewish oligarchs, which are like a fraction of the amount of billionaires that we have here in the United States, and not actually talking about what's really going on. So
I think
is it controlled opposition?
Yes. And it's always been. I mean, that's MAGA and the Tea Party were also that, there's the real potential for, the working class, when it is immiserated, generates the potential for revolutionary energy. And I think the right does it in like, and the right subverts that and channels it into controlled opposition, that it's always focusing on blaming a scapegoat, which is a marginalized group of people. And that's a pattern you've seen since the Middle Ages, since the Christian church. In 300 started blaming the Jews for everything. Jews, they coined the term pagans and said they are the forces of evil. Anyone who is not part of the church and tithing to the church and giving us money derives their power from Satan. And that was Jews, pagans, heretics, just Christians that wanted to like do a chill Jesus thing and not tithe to the
Arian Christians back in the day.
Yeah, like they were also deriving their power from Satan, and the church positioned themselves as they were the sole light in the world, and they were engaged in this giant cosmic battle of good and evil. And anyone within their flock was good, and anyone outside their flock was bad. And this is how they conquered Europe and built gold cathedrals at a time that when most people were like immiserated peasants, and the peasants were happy to overlook all the outbursts of violence that you saw. The person on person violence was directed towards the most vulnerable people within these empires, the Jewish and the Romani and small pagan faith groups that didn't fall under the church. So this is a very effective tactic that's very, very old. You can call it controlled opposition. I think the Democrats have to be like a little more sophisticated about it, because they don't just blame. Well, now increasingly they do also just blame immigrants. Kamala Harris certainly did that during her campaign. But they have to do this double speak where they pretend to be for the working people and the marginalized, but then actually don't ever do that.
As colonial outcasts, I think we should also remember that America is not the center of the world. We tend, even in our own obviously inherently decolonial kind of discourses, still center America and what's happening there, and as like the precursor of whatever is going to happen next in the world. And I think that in and of itself is part of the kind of logics and premises of American exceptionalism and American democracy around the world. And that project is failing. It's already in a process of collapse. And I think there are a lot of things to point at, which I'm sure Greg can do a lot better job at than I do, but things that are happening around the world that point towards that collapse of empire. And the fact that we live in a decolonial era, in a sense, right? Who knows what the next thing is going to be? We don't know. I'm not speaking from like an optimistic point of view necessarily. But realistically, America is not the center of the world. There is like BRICS that is happening. There is China and all whatever is happening there. There is like what's happening across Africa and movements of decolonization that are happening. There is this movement away and out of American stronghold of the world. And I think that is going to also show up in how little it would matter, or at least increasingly less and less, what's happening in American politics for the rest of the world. Because while the American empire was doing its thing all of these last couple of 100 years, in the rest of the world, there have been consistently examples of from countries to communities that live in anywhere but a strongly capitalist kind of neoliberal way of life across the world. Like the examples of alternatives are not just possible, but have always been there, So yeah, I think in that sense, it's kind of important to remember when we talk about this and keep centering American politics in the conversation,
No, I mean, I completely with that. I agree with that completely. Unfortunately, like, I do think that with specifically within the context of Palestine, though, it begins and ends with the United States and U.S. politics, because
for the moment,
for the moment, like we're in the twilight phase, and we're not getting it back. Like I don't think parallels, like a lot of like armchair history bros like to compare like the United States to the Roman Empire. Doesn't really work at all, but I mean, we do have a lot of inertia behind it. So I think it's going to be a long period that might get pretty violent, at least on the home front. But they spent a lot of time talking about, AIPAC and stuff, but MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, who was kind of exiled from the United States after he ordered the murder and dismemberment of an American journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, founder of Dawn, and now he's back investing $500 billion in the U.S. economy, but we're also giving him a lot. We were just signing a defense contract or defense agreement with Saudi Arabia to potentially send U.S. troops to defend Riyadh. Absolutely insane. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of like real estate deals and contracts, and Saudi Arabia is deeply invested in redeveloping Gaza and turning it into the next Dubai.
And Sudan.
And Sudan. The UAE is all over that as well. UAE is taking one of the leading roles in this like international stabilization force in Gaza. Like these are sub-imperial states that also like deeply just like AIPAC and the Israeli lobby really impact our domestic politics. as well. Like Pam Bondi, the attorney general under Trump, she used to be a foreign lobbyist, a registered foreign lobbyist for the Qatari government. And everyone wants to just, like, all these people on the right want to just focus on the Jews. I was like, that's not really how this entire thing works, because all of these, like, massive oil sheikhs will come in, buy a bunch of property in San Diego or Miami, and, like, squeeze Americans for rent too. Like the influence of real estate, like, which is a global industry with connections everywhere. Very, very small, like, community of real estate moguls, who Donald Trump is one, Mike Waltz, the UN secretary, Steve Witkoff, and just about, like, most of his cabinet is heavily invested in real estate. Tony Blair as well. So I just hope, I'm not sure where I was trying to go with that. I was just hoping people could, like, understand, like, how transnational this is. So if you only talk about, like, America, even as, like, the empire, it's just like America determines everything. It's like, yeah, but our sub-imperial states, our comprador states, actually have a lot of influence on what happens here in America, because they're in the 1% club, which is a transnational club.
Yeah.
As much as being, like, a class reductionist has really hurt, I think, leftism. Like, when, like, being a class reductionist to the extent that you do not see racism or sexism or anything like that, it really is, like, a very simple concept that rich people are in solidarity with one another, and, like, all the, like, race and gender and ethnicity and all these supposed rivalries really do fall away once you reach a certain class. And that is a simple idea that I think we need to make more widespread, and that many people have figured out recently over the course of the last 2 years in a way that I find promising.
I mean, I think that's a really great point, because the uber rich definitely have a lot of class consciousness, something we always talk about. And I before I, like, ran off and enlisted as an infantry private when I was, like, 19, I grew up in New England boarding schools. Like, didn't have a trust fund or anything, but there was, like, Kennedy and Bloomberg offshoots, and I had an Israeli roommate, I had a couple Zionist roommates, and people, like, will support, like, all these WASPs, these rich WASPs that whose ancestors used to be lords, like feudal lords and stuff. Just, like, every generation's been wealthy as shit, and they sit on the board, of, like, massive corporations in the tech sector and the pharmaceutical sector, because, like, most of these people, like, these board members usually sit on 3 other boards in 3 other sectors on average, and they're interacting with, like, Zionists and, like, Chinese businessmen and Saudi oil barons, essentially. And what I try to explain to people, having grown up in that world, is, like, they don't care that they're Jewish or Israeli or a Zionist. They care about business, and Israel is our outpost from that perspective in the Middle East. They will do things that that American companies cannot be seen doing, essentially, in a lot of ways. That's just one example. So it's just really frustrating, when people on the right are asking for this populist movement, and you just want to focus on one group of people. It's the Jews that control everything, and also at the same time, the Guatemalan itinerant farmer is also stealing your job as well. It's just like, what? There's just, like, not a cohesive ideology behind it as well.
Yeah. I mean, racism is manufactured to support economic, investment, right? Like, in order to justify the slave trade, has to be invented a whole new science that explained why it's completely fine to go to another person's land and steal them, right? But ultimately, all of these things come down to capitalism and how these things are invested.
I like this phrasing. I've never thought of it before, but racism is controlled opposition. Like, that's the function that it serves.
Because
it's the tool.
Yep.
Like, racism, something I say repeatedly in the book is racism, like, hate is manufactured by wealthy elites to consolidate their power.
Yeah.
And, like, but I like that racism is controlled opposition for the right. Like that's so simple.
Yeah. It could resonate with them too. It's like, oh, what? You're saying some racist shit? Oh, are you fed? You fed,
Yeah.
bro? Huh? No, but I mean, it's actually kind of makes sense, and it's kind of like a really clean idea, especially trying to get people over to the left, because like it was manufactured to protect the interests of the ruling class and capital, like because the modern police was founded in 1829, based off in London by Sir Robert Peel, based off using veterans of Irish anti-Irish counterinsurgency forces in the north of Ireland that was occupied. And boom, those are now cops using the same counterinsurgency tactics on their own people. And then also, then the Irishmen, a lot of people had to leave, famine, whatever. Sorry, absolutely intentional famine. They signed themselves into indentured servitude, went to work in the Caribbean and the Carolinas alongside enslaved Africans. And a couple times the indentured servants, who were basically, well, pretty much slavery, not as bad as like chattel slavery, but like we in the modern day we would call it that. And they started uniting with the actual African slaves, and the ruling class was like, "Oh my God, there's not a lot of us. So what do? Make the slave patrol, give this poor Irish farmer, be like, okay, you're no longer an indentured servant. You can own a little land if you're a man. We'll give you a badge. We'll give you a gun." They didn't pay the slave patrol well at all. Maybe if they're super lucky and senior, they'd get like a crappy horse. But no, it was engineered to break that kind of solidarity.
Just enough dignity.
Yeah.
And income to make themselves feel a little bit better and to feel grateful for the scraps they were given. I'll say this about the right that I won't say about liberal Democrats is that they know something's up. Like, why are they so drawn? So why are they so drawn to conspiracy theories? Because they get that the game is rigged, right? I think that's like really apparent in rural areas and in the South, where like poverty hits a lot harder than it does in urban centers. They know something's up. They're just like, but then there is this controlled opposition that points them to look for who's screwing them over in the wrong places. Whereas like middle-class, comfortable liberal Democrats, the faith that they had that the system was fair, that the democracy was real, and I think this is breaking down a little bit over the last. But the faith they have in their neoliberal politics and their knee-jerk rejection of any notion of a conspiracy in the government, that's like truly credulous. You know what I mean? Like,
you can really see all of these things playing out in Palestine very, very, very directly, like both the kind of historical manufacturing of Arabophobia and Islamophobia, which, I would bet that Ashkenazi Jews who came on boats to the land of Palestine were not inherently having any kind of prejudices about Arabic-speaking people. Why would they have? Definitely not the Arab Jews who came from the area, which were themselves Arab. And then you can see very clearly how over the years, because of the investment in the colonial project was there, and of course everything that it provides for them, that as a result of that, like racism starts proliferating and being created. And even now, like you said, what you just said, Sim, on the kind of the liberal investment of like not being able to even conceptualize how Israel is not a democratic state, or like being so entrenched in this like constantly making comparisons between the oppressed and the oppressors, which to us are so clearly defined. And I think all of these things are really kind of a testament of how all of this is playing out.
Yeah. And, the early Israeli state set about to very purposely destroy Arab Jews' cultural identity. Like in the research I did for the book, I mean, like splitting up families, making sure that like none of these communities were allowed to like settle near each other. If they got in a shipment of Algerian Jews, they'd send them to like far-flung corners all over occupied Palestine so that they would break up these communities, force them to speak Hebrew. you know, and then made the entire apparatus, even though like, you know, the hundreds of thousands of Jews arriving from all over the Arab world because the Mossad had made it uncomfortable for them to stay where they were. You know, suddenly, even though all of them spoke Arabic, Arabic was not the language of bureaucracy and access to resources and power in Israel. And so the Arab identity is now it's like I gather a very revolutionary thing for Arab Jews to call themselves Arab. You know, instead they have dropped Mizrahi, which literally means Oriental.
Yeah, now it's weaponized against themselves. Like
Mizrahi,
now it's weaponized against themselves. Like Mizrahi Jews, if you tell them, or if you tell on myself, when I say I'm an Arab Jew, because my grandparents spoke Arabic and came from Arab-speaking countries, or lived in Palestine before the British Mandate or the State of Israel and spoke Arabic as their only language, they would get so deeply offended.
Yeah.
And you can see clearly how it's like this internalized oppression, internalized racism that clearly is manufactured by like political, economic investments. Like now they enjoy at least a higher level of privilege than, you know, Palestinians, like the actual Arabs. So they are somewhere positioned in the socioeconomic ladder, and now they are like, okay, we have to defend this thing. But you can clearly see that it's transparent, you know.
Yeah, get on that slave patrol, baby. At least you won't be at the bottom rung making the least amount of money.
And you see this in the U.S. with how many like Latino ICE agents are there, you know, and people are like shocked by this. Like, no, of course.
Yeah.
You'll always have that. You'll always have capos. Like,
yeah, well,
they call me capo. That's the funny thing.
Oh, me too.
We are collaborating with the Nazis, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I get hit with race traitor by white nationalists, so that's fun. But here's the thing about whiteness: it's really kind of a made up construct, and it expands when it's not in power. So during the Trump campaign, it was like, yeah, we'll take some people in Dearborn and get some like Muslims to endorse Trump. And yeah, we'll get some Cubans in Miami, you know, who hate socialism to, you know, join ICE and, you know, support Trump. And, you know, but eventually, once we're in power, the whiteness and the supremacy behind it, and this happens with Ashkenazi Jews in Israel, contracts. Mm-hmm. It contracts. And contracts, and as it consolidates power. So yeah, you'll always get left out. And then if you are clearly a white person like me, but you have the wrong political ideology, then there's something else wrong with you, and you're no longer in the circle either way. So it's not only do you have to be the correct race, but also have the correct politics, i.e., fascism. So yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing right now. But just kind of like circling back towards where we started with Sarah's banger of a speech, like she wrote notes, like she wrote the notes down, and she was clearly reading bullet points. She published them, probably proofread them, and was like, yeah, I'm going with that. Like how do they not see that they're the Nazis like now? Like that's
how the human brain works. Like,
yeah, I get
it starts with material investment, and her entire economic structure and privilege and power is invested in empire. And now the brain is coming up with all of these stories and mythoses and mythologies and fucking delusional craziness. That's just how it works. And it's the same for Israelis. It's the same everywhere, you know?
And it's the racism. Like, it makes sense. Like, what she said makes sense to her because of racism, because she thinks Palestinians, because of their blood, because of who they are always bad. Even when they're emaciated children with a gun in their face, they're still bad. That's the thing that she can't get the young people to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she will never voice as well. She will never. This is the thing about racism. It's always lurking in the shadows, in the kind of premises and logical conclusions. Like, Israelis will not come out and say, most of them, of course, there are a lot that do, but like, let's say liberal Zionists will not come out and say like, I am a racist. I think that inherently we are better and we should have superior rights here. But if you really take every talking point and every argument and everything they say to its logical conclusion, like, okay, so what does that mean? It always comes down to their sense of supremacy. You know, it's like this. Being racist is not something that you usually shout from the rooftops. It's something that kind of is always behind everything that you say and everything that you do, you know.
But let us take heart, because this was Obama's speechwriter. She pulled the wool over the whole world's eyes. You know what I mean? Like, I was so passionate for Obama in 2008. I block walked for him. I was making the calls. I was like crying and hugging people in a Dave and Buster's at the watch party when he was elected. Like, the whole world fell under the spell of her words and logic at one time. And now
she just went viral for saying the most out-of-pocket shit ever.
Huh?
And now she just went super viral for saying the most out-of-pocket shit.
Right. Instantly. Like, she is so out of touch now. She cannot, and she's saying, she's admitting her total failure to be able to reach young people anymore with that horseshit propaganda that she was in charge of for his 8-year administration. I don't know how long she was writing speeches for him, but you know, that what an admission of failure. And then to be scorned and laughed at by the entire world over her admission of failure. Yes, we're winning the information war. Yes.
Yeah. I like that you say admission of failure, because we can start pointing out all of these places in which their speeches, like you see it in Netanyahu and all of these like ADL leaders, and how they talk about like the information war and needing to control TikTok and blah, blah, blah. Like, this is literally saying we failed miserably. And that is good.
Yeah. Just lamenting the double-edged sword of Holocaust education. I mean, look, bottom line, when you have to purchase a company to control a narrative, that doesn't seem like it's coming from a position of strength. But in your experience, is someone entrenched as that like reachable? I mean, we're always going to have Nazis, and we're always going to have Zionists, and always going to have these like really ideological like ethno supremacists. I don't know. They're just going to, like, her and Jonathan Greenblatt, or they're always just going to exist. But have you had any experience like reaching someone that was that entrenched? I'm just curious.
Which one of us?
Either one.
Well, my mom.
Yeah.
So I think I spend most of my time and content, and I say in like the preface to my book, like, this is not a book written for liberal Zionists or diehard Zionists or anyone like that. Peter Beinart's book is great for liberal Zionists as like a stepping stone towards anti-Zionism. This book, because I think it's like usually a waste of energy to talk to those people. They're so deeply invested. Their whole identity is invested in this framework. But the vast majority of the world, especially on October 8th, was simply uninformed and apathetic about Palestine. So that's a much more strategic audience to talk to, right? So that's a majority of who I talk to. But I do think, like, in our personal lives, if you have a blood family member who is one of these like diehard Zionists, like my mother was, you kind of have a responsibility, if you can, to communicate with them. And my mom cut me off in 2021. Called me a terrorist because of my activism around Palestine, called me a terrorist, and did not talk to me or see her grandkids for 4 years because of Zionism. But she started watching some of my videos, and she got back in touch with me around December of 2025 of this year. And we started talking. And like I've said, we've had some like breakthrough conversations. She doesn't use the word illegals to talk about human beings anymore. You know, it's not like she's not like all the way there. She's not, you know, and she may never be. But certainly we've made progress on some things through these strategies I talked about, of like finding common ground, keeping it very personal, you know, and seeing the truth enmeshed in all of the propaganda that she's absorbing. So yeah, so I mean, I think it's incredibly exhausting and difficult labor. But I do think one-to-one conversations can make a difference. And I do think if it's like someone you have a personal connection to, it's possible. But I don't think like our goal strategically as leftists should be like to get the Nick Fuenteses to change their minds. I think it's like to put out our narrative to as wide of an audience as possible that may be like apathetic or haven't made up their minds up yet. to try to get those people, because that's certainly the majority of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that our most winning strategy is building alternatives, like physical, material alternatives that make as many of us dependent of, the state and capitalism. That's the main strategy. That's what we should organize for. That's the only thing that is going to subvert those superstructures of logics and premises, and allow as many of us to have as much of our creative passions and desires and abilities be freed to go towards whatever worlds we want to build.
Yeah,
As side quests, I'm always down to go and kind of talk to people around me and engage in these discourses, and I'm not gonna block you unless you are like directly harming me or people that I love. And I totally agree with you. And I think I learned, like, when you Sim posted this story about what happened with your mom, I reached out to my mother. I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's try to talk anyway. And that was really helpful. And I think we need it. Like, if each one of us has these like a few touch points that are personal and direct with people around us, that's already a coalition of, tens of millions of people.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, that's really powerful. I agree with you on mutual aid and building power outside the state. And I think we see that really, like, what taught me that was living in Houston, where we so often become stateless after natural disasters, which are only going to exacerbate, as like you said, Yuval, like climate limits are happening. So we've had, since I lived here, like numerous hurricanes where the grid is completely down for a week at a time, winter storms also that brought the grid down for a week at a time. And you see immediately people coming together. The instinct is to come together in a really beautiful way and just like help each other and feed each other. And like capitalism disappears pretty quickly,
We can't have anarchy. Send in the that's the climate displacement plan.
Exactly. Exactly. And also build ways of communicate, like tech that liberates. So we have spaces that we can organize that are self-hosted, and if we can also create, and people are already working on it, alternatives to the network system that we are running on right now, so we would be able to communicate on other than Wi-Fi signals in case things are fault. Like, there's a lot of shit that we can do, and it's already happening. And I think that's the main strategy. And then there is like engaging in discourses and all of this kind of stuff, which is like, I see it as like important side quests,
Yeah. One thing I do personally is, because I'm a veteran, I go into like veterans actions and stuff where there's people who are actually more conservative, and they'll be like, I was just in DC and we were organizing this like thing on Veterans Day, which was super cool, seeing like Jelani roll up to the White House on Veterans Day. A lot of, I'll tell you this right now, a lot of guys who were in Iraq didn't like that. But anyways, that was crazy. So we had a bunch of like Palestine flags. Abby Martin was also speaking at the event and stuff. And a couple guys came up to me. It was like, hey, can you tone down the Palestine stuff? We're trying to talk about Trump. I was like, how do you talk about Trump without talking about Palestine? Oh, you don't like ICE? Well, let me tell you where they test all their drones and surveillance equipment out on, my guy. Like, this is all connected. So like, we need to stop being so complacent about foreign policy. And as a veteran, you should actually know better about that.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, so there's something everyone can do to get involved. I mean, that's like the most powerful way to start changing. Like, this is a grassroots thing. You're not going to be able to like get into some like influencers DMs and get them to like change their mind and change their audience. You actually have to. It sucks, but the time of being armchair internet warriors might be over. Might have to get out and speak to humans.
Thank God.
Sucks, I know.
I say as a content creator, but yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, well, guys, I gotta go do stuff. I have to prepare for a road trip for freaking Thanksgiving, where I'm sure I'll have a lot of controversial conversations, as I'm sure some of you guys will on our,
Are you coming? You're coming to Texas?
I live in Texas. I'm in Austin.
Oh yeah, you're in Austin. I knew that. Yeah, I knew that.
Wait, you're in H-Town?
Yeah, I'm in Houston.
Oh,
You gotta
okay.
hang out sometime.
I will be in Houston soon, probably.
Really? Let's hang out. Yeah,
My
we'll talk. Let me
partner's
know.
family, entire family is in Houston, so I come there once in a while to experience Christmas, which is something as a Jew never had anything to do with, but it's fun.
I'm leaning into Christmas this year. I spent
Yeah.
years feeling sort of guilty about celebrating Christmas, and now I'm just like doing it. Whatever.
Why?
Huh?
Why would you feel guilty about just like?
'Cause I'm Jewish, and like I don't know, it just always felt weird. My dad didn't like it. Like I don't know. I felt like I had to like make a big deal about Han. And I really like Hanukkah too. I like latkes and latkes.
At this point, does it matter? We just celebrate because, you know.
Yeah, but a tree is like fun, and I don't know,
Exactly.
fun
Yeah.
and pretty and whatever.
Yeah, well, I think my partner, she one of her parents was a Roman Catholic, so she does both. Best of both worlds on all the presents and celebration of capitalism and all that stuff. But yeah, when y'all are in Houston, let me know. It's only a few hours.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm here always.
Oh, you're here always.
Yeah. Yeah, it's where I live.
All right. Well, yeah, we have a friggin' La Nina or El Nino winter, so it's going to be super muggy, which I'm kind of bummed about.
Well, I just heard there's maybe going to be a weakening. Okay, it's going to be really hot at the poles, which means we might get a polar vortex for Christmas.
Well, we will if Ted Cruz leaves the country. So, all right, y'all. Well, thanks so much for coming on to talk about this. Just kind of wanted to address that video and some of these issues because I feel like people aren't really talking about like what the America First movement is in the context of being a left-wing person. Definitely encourage you to talk to anybody, but not to expend your time and energy on people like Sarah, who will probably just never ever get it. So thanks, Sim Kern and Yuval. I'll put your socials in the description and your book. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for
Great
having us.
conversation.
All right, guys, we will see you next week to address whatever catastrophe has happened over the weekend. Cheers, y'all. Get some rest and get ready to get stuck back in because, as Sim said, you know, this revolutionary energy comes in waves. So one might be breaking soon. Cheers, y'all. See you next time.